Okay, so we're live. This is Brother Wolf. This is HS 285, Group 11 on the Stark Laws. And Maddie's going to start as soon as I can share the slides so she can see those. And so Maddie, when you see the slides, you let me know and you can just go ahead and start.
Yeah, and we're on the missing one.
Okay, how's that?
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so this is group 11. We're going to be talking about the Stark Laws. Just real quick, what we're going to be going over is like a brief bio on Courtney Stark, who's the author of both regulations. And then I'll talk a little bit about who enforces the Stark Laws and what each regulation is exactly. Go ahead and go to the next slide. Okay. Courtney Stark Jr., who is also named is a representative from California, and he was born in Milwaukee, Wisconsin in 1931. He earned his bachelor's from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology in 1953, and he went on to earn his MBA in 1960. In between schooling, he was in the United States Air Force from 1955 to 1957. He was a bank executive and was an alternate delegate for the Democratic National Convention in 1972. And he was also elected as a Democrat to the 93rd and the 19 succeeding Congresses from 1972 to 2013. He was a chair member in the Committee on the District of Columbia and was an unsuccessful candidate for re-election to the 113th Congress in 2012. So you can see that Pete Stark is a very honorable man, as well as the author of both of the Stark regulations. Next slide. Okay, so why do we need Stark laws? The first reason that we need the Stark laws is fraud. Medicare fraud is characterized by knowingly submitting false statements or making misrepresentations of facts to obtain a federal health care payment for which no entitlement would otherwise exist. Knowingly soliciting, paying, or accepting remuneration to induce or reward referrals for items or services reimbursed by federal health care programs, or making prohibited referrals for certain designated health services. So anyone can commit healthcare fraud. It can be a solo venture or a broad-based operation by an institution. And even organized crime has infiltrated the Medicare program and masqueraded as Medicare providers and suppliers. Defrauding the federal government and its program is illegal and can expose individuals to potential criminal and civil remedies, including imprisonment, fines, and penalties. The penalties associated with Medicare fraud reflect just how serious this is and the need for aggressive intervention. Providers and healthcare organizations who commit healthcare fraud risk losing their professional licenses and exclusion from participation in federal healthcare programs. The second reason we need the Stark laws is abuse. Abuse includes practices that directly or indirectly result in unnecessary costs to the Medicare program and that are not consistent with the goals of providing patients with services that are medically necessary, meeting professionally recognized standards, and pricing fairly. Some examples of Medicare abuse include billing for services that weren't necessary or charging excessively for services or supplies and misusing codes on a claim. Medicare abuse can also expose providers to criminal and civil liability. Go ahead and go to the next slide. So, Stark Law, which is actually 3 separate provisions, governs physician self-referral for Medicare and Medicaid patients. It does include a series of exceptions to the ban in order to accommodate legitimate business arrangements. And also, yeah, go to the next slide, actually. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about the anti-kickback law because although it wasn't mentioned in the outline, it's something that came up in the research several times. But to be clear, the Stark Law is not the same as the federal anti-kickback law, but they are closely related. The anti-kickback statute is a criminal law that prohibits the knowing and willful payment of remuneration to induce or reward patient referrals or the generation of business involving any item or service payable by the federal healthcare programs. In some industries, it's acceptable to reward those who refer business to you. However, in the federal healthcare programs, paying for referrals is a crime, and penalties for this crime include fines, jail terms, and exclusion from participation in the federal healthcare programs. Next slide. Okay, so the physician self-referral law, which is the Stark Law, can be found in Section 1877 of the Social Security Act. And what it does is it prohibits physicians from referring patients to receive designated health services payable by Medicare and Medicaid from entities with which the physician or an immediate family member has a financial relationship, unless an exception applies. Financial relationships include both ownership and investment interest and compensation arrangements. It also prohibits the entity from presenting or causing to be presented claims to Medicare for those referred services, and it establishes some exceptions and grants the Secretary the authority to create regulatory exceptions for financial relationships that don't pose a risk of program or patient abuse. Also, this law is a strict liability statute, which means that no proof of specific intent to violate the laws was required. Next slide. Okay, so Stark 2 came to be when a number of those who observed the Stark 1 law recommended extending the ban to other services and programs. So the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act of 1993 expanded the restriction to a range of additional health services and applied it to both Medicare and Medicaid. This also contained clarifications and modifications to the exceptions in the original law, and minor technical corrections to these provisions were included in the Social Security Amendment of 1994. Okay, so who enforces Stark Law? That would be the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Next slide. Okay, and then an important note, we just wanted to note that physician-owned healthcare facilities place the entire facility under Stark Law. Brother Wolf wanted us to pay special attention to this concept, so this is what we found on the Stark Law website. It says, ongoing regulatory changes made by the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services have modified physician investment guidelines in the Phase 3 final regulations of the Stark Law and in the 2008 Medicare Physician Fee Schedule, proposed in final rules. The 2008 fee schedule's limitations on reimbursement for diagnostic tests and its prohibitions on an independent diagnostic testing facility sharing its facility with another Medicare provider or supplier have made investment in certain healthcare ancillaries, such as imaging equipment and anatomic pathology labs, less attractive to physicians. Investment opportunities continue to exist, but awareness of the impact of these legal and regulatory procedures is strongly advised before any financial consideration is given. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And that is it.
So it looks like you're done. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, I want to say this was one of the best presentations on the Stark Law that I've ever had. So I've taught quite a few semesters, and Stark Law, it's a hard one to understand, and it can be really detailed. But this was a wonderful overview. And just the right amount of detail, and I think it was excellent. And I'm really glad that you brought up the slide about the anti-kickback statute, because that it is closely related to Stark. And I want to just point out kind of the main difference between, you did a good job in pointing out some of the differences between the anti-kickback statute and Stark, but I also want to kind of point out a general distinction that Stark is strictly, it's a strict liability law, meaning you might not have had the intent of breaking that law, but if that law got broken, it doesn't matter what your intent was, it's broken and there are fines to pay, whereas the anti-kickback statute requires intent. So you have to have some sort of intent to improperly induce physician referrals and those sorts of things. Stark Law, it's really, really complex and complicated, and you introduced in that early slide Pete Stark. He was asked now, and it's really evolved over time. He's been asked recently, is this, what do you think of all this? And he just thinks it's a mess. So he's kind of, he thinks the way that it's evolved and it's become this kind of regulatory gotcha type of scenario, it's very, very unfortunate. I wanted to point out that one of the organizations that we'd studied already, Intermountain Healthcare, and I can post this link, but a couple of years ago, they self-disclosed a violation of Stark Law and settled for a large amount of money. But the violation, according to them, was that the physicians didn't sign the contracts. So paperwork, and there's always two sides to every story, so I don't know if that's exactly true, but I am aware of examples where mere paperwork errors were the cause of Stark violations. So if you don't have a current contract that's signed for the current year, even though contract law might allow you to continue on, Stark Law says, look, if you don't have a signed one, it's a straight up violation. So I think its roots were good. It was to avoid physician self-referral, but over time it's become, and it still focuses on that, but over time it's also become technical violations also can cause real trouble for healthcare organizations. So, excuse me, so as administrators, or as if you're involved in healthcare, the most important thing is to know that you should have either in-house legal counsel review agreements and relationships with physicians, just to make sure it doesn't go awry of all these technical rules and laws. So really, really nice job. I mentioned this in last night's group, but I'll mention it here again. The test will ask you for 6 legislative initiatives. This is one of them, Stark. The other one is HIPAA, which was last night's group. You mentioned the other one here, Maddie, the anti-kickback statute, so that's number 3. Then you have the False Claims Act as number 4. You have PPACA, Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, is number 5. And number 6 is EMTALA, which another group is going to present on. But I just wanted to make sure you guys were all aware of those 6 legislative initiatives, because that's something you'll be asked about. And you're supposed to know about those as well, not just the full names of them, but you're also supposed to know some of the details. So really, really great job. I appreciate it. If you would be so kind as to post those slides on this week's group discussion board, and then just kind of monitor the discussion board to make sure, to see if people are asking questions or have comments.
Okay.
Any other last minute comments or questions? Yeah, again, Maddie, excellent job. This was, Stark, I think it was very accurate and very complete without going into, detail that we all don't need to hear at this level of a course. But excellent job. One of the best Stark presentations that we've had in this section, in this class, mostly because it throws a lot of students, it throws them for a loop, because it's such a big topic and it's hard to get your arms around it. But you did an excellent job. Your group did a great job. So thank you very much. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Bye.